Hi, I'm Matt Hernandez, and this is Book Chat with you. In most every episode, I try to have this be a conversation about literature with you. Now, this is actually true crime, which as I first started looking at that and realizing it, and I researched this a tiny bit, I was like, man, how am I going to talk about this? But then as I kept looking at this writing of this, called The Demon of Belfry, by Hildegarde Teilhet, I believe that's how you say it. A American journalist wrote this about 40 years after the event, and as you look at this version of it, it kind of is written like literature. Now, I'm not trying to, have that pompous type of speak about, what is literature or something like that, but it does kind of ring true to that, at least in this one, because this is kind of a true crime piece. I don't know how long this kind of genre has been around. I would have imagined it was a little bit newer, but at least this case was so sensational that the journalist who wrote this account of this, she wrote this in, 1936. She was born either on 1905 or 1906 on November. But this event happened in 1895, 10 years before she was born. And I wasn't familiar with this at all. So if you like true crime or something like that, you could probably educate me on some of the details or something like that. I looked at 2 more accounts on YouTube. I listened to them at least. And the accounts do seem to vary a little bit. And the first one, I could hear the female narrator, and that's the one I'll post down below by Deadly Truths. You can hear part of the editorializing in it, but she clearly states that. When you read this account, it kind of blends in. And there's quite a bit of editorializing with the way this whole thing is written. So, I'm over 2 minutes in, and I didn't say what this was. So, a man, Henry William Theodore Durant, he does a horrible crime. He has a job at a local church, and this guy's a bit of a creeper. He is a bit flirtatious at times, might be a little cagey with other women and stuff like that. He was from Canada, lives in San Francisco. He starts to court, if I use the old word, kind of dates, Miss Blanche. I don't know if date's the right words. I don't always know whenever you can say that's, is it just one date? Is it just 2 dates? Is it just walking home from here? You walk home for 45 minutes and there's, But he'd become close to Blanche. One day she doesn't show up at home. And at this time, she lived with her aunt and uncle. I believe she was biologically related to her aunt. And she went to school, like college. She had cooking classes kind of outside of college, but nevertheless took even more classes. Very cool, right? To just be, just wanting those settings to learn and study. She had gone to this church several days a week. And then there was another woman, Minnie Williams, which Theo Durant killed days later. And so the way Miss Blanche was killed is she was strangled in the attic of the church. It seems that her body was left there, just kind of left there for several days, and she was caught. Some instances was like somebody went up there just to kind of hasn't been up in the attic. One day you just go up to the attic. Was there a smell or what? And there was just signs of strangulation. What is it called? Asphyxiation? What's the word? Well, strangulation. So not much later, maybe a few days later, he does the same thing to Miss Minnie. And but first he stabs her, and then he strangles. Now with these events too, it's also what about the church? Did they not see anything? How is it up there for days? What about a smell? How did they finally notice this? Were more people concerned about Miss Blanche's whereabouts? I read this account and I listened to 2 others I wouldn't have too much more time to look at everything else, because if I had more time, I would have recorded this days ago. And I don't even know if I can get this online today or if it would have to be tomorrow. And, but at one point, Theo had told Blanche's aunt, well, maybe she's become a girl of the streets, which is so incredibly insulting, Even if you take away the fact that he's just a gross murderer and all that, but even aside from some of that, I mean, it's just really, really gross. So apparently these cases were very sensationalized throughout the U.S. I mean, I guess rightly so. I mean, it was a very grotesque thing. And Theo had always maintained that he was innocent, but all the evidence in every conceivable way had pointed to him. In one account that I heard, apparently a priest had asked him, to sort of confess at the end. Not confess for anything other than just to confess for his own soul, for his own sake. And he just refused to. I guess he wouldn't ever give people the satisfaction, some kind of like closure about whatever, And, it's a little bit hard covering this because I want to have a style at times, and maybe it's not always appropriate, but if I have a single thought, how can I relate just a pinch of a feeling, like even the word closure, to something else? And, I think there needs to be a bit of a tact of being a bit more respectful with part of this, which, it's kind of hard because as I look at this several times over, the author here certainly does do quite a bit of editorializing of this whole thing. So as usual, as with most of these, I am going to read this. Oh yeah, before I read this, the white background behind me, yeah, I'm about to move back to the US pretty soon. So I cannot be some kind of a what's the word, LARPer or something, and like act like I read a good solid 20 books, because there's no books behind me. I'm only leaving about 3 books here with me in China before moving back home, and a group of comic books that I'm looking at from over there. So, yeah, but whenever I do end up editing this to video, I'll put the text right here on my right-hand side, on your left-hand side. And, I mean, as I pull out random sentences here, that you will see some of the editorializing, you will see some of the kind of practice in literature writing. And apparently this journalist did write some novels, so she did insert part of that literary style into this. Was that appropriate? I don't know. It gets people interested. I mean, people should be aware of stuff like this. Not maybe some murders, but at least maybe the parts that is like that we can learn from these situations, and what can we do and how can we stay safe or whatever like that. Okay, so I'm going to read about 2 pages and give a few thoughts on this version from page 65. So there were rumors. In addition, it is highly probable that Blanche Lamont knew and had discussed Theo with a fellow church member, a certain Miss Minnie Williams, an unhappily obsessed young woman from across the bay who is quite cognizant of the young man's latent possibilities. Furthermore, there is a strong suspicion, if not positive conviction, that before this April morning, Blanche herself had experienced direct proof that Theo did not always act as an assistant Sunday school superintendent should. Neither her aunt nor her sister were very specific at a later date about what happened between Blanche and Theo during a twilight walk in December through Golden Gate Park. He brought her back safely. He apologized to the aunt for keeping her so late, and after that there was a sudden interval of a number of weeks before she seemed to have allowed him to see her again. It may have been nothing of consequence, a desire on Theo's part to put his arm around her, to toy with her gloves. Whatever it is, she had made up her mind about seeing before seeing him again. But to return to that Wednesday morning, Blanche and Theo rode as far as Polk Street, near the boys' high school. There they got off. According to Theo's statement, she went on foot to the high school, and he continued on to his college, and he claimed on his oath that after that moment, he never saw her alive again. By her schoolmates' evidence, Blanche went to the high school and in the afternoon appeared at cooking classes in the normal school. Here she dutifully remained until about 5 minutes before 3. None of her companions noticed anything unusual about her behavior. She simply sat there quietly during the lectures, a tall, dreamy-eyed girl, no doubt thinking about Theo pleasantly and happily. Yeah, I'm going to interrupt myself before I overlook it. Usually I just read nonstop, but look at that. No doubt thinking about Theo pleasantly and happily. I mean, there's a bit of editorializing here, right? Is that the best word, editorialize, or is it just, I don't know, she's putting a bit of this novel writing into this, you know? I mean, who's to think what she's hanging out about, you know? I mean, I've hung out with a few people here. They just kind of like bug me to hang out, you know? And there was, I don't know, I don't know. Yeah, I'll continue then. At 2:55 p.m., when the cooking lectures ended, 3 other students, Minnie Edwards, Alice Pleasant, and May Lanigan, saw her go out to meet Theo. She went straight to him. Now Theo was so impatient to be with Blanche that he came back early. He remained in front of the normal school from 2 o'clock on. Old Miss Mary Vogel, who was afraid of burglars and who had lived diagonally across from the school at 919 Powell, was looking out her window. She saw him standing there. Because he remained so long, she became convinced he was a burglar sizing up the place to rob later on that night. With that in mind, there is no wonder she was later able to identify him without hesitation. I mean, isn't this also like a tiny bit of like editorializing as well? I mean, I think this is a reasonable one, but I might not get the perfect sentence to demonstrate, but let me just finish this paragraph, I suppose. He stayed there until the girls started coming out of school. Suddenly he ran like a boy, and old Mrs. Vogel to the to the cable car at Clay and Powell, where he got his breath and put on his hat. Miss Lanigan, one of the 3 schoolmates, remembered that Theo tipped his hat and then got on the cable car before Blanche did, and then Blanche followed him and sat down beside him, not the action of a young lady being coursed. Theo was dressed very smartly too that day in a blue coat and vest of cheviot, and matching pants of another material and knobby hat. As the cable car went on down the hill, the observant Miss Lanigan had a clear view of him next to Blanche, again engaged in conversation. His long hair attracted my attention at the time. He did not have much of a mustache, just a short growth. I noticed the way he had cut his hair. It struck me as unusual to see a gentleman with such long hair. The time is growing short for Blanche. Mrs. Elizabeth D. Crosset, well in her prime, who had known Theo for about 4 years, happened to be passing by in a streetcar going the opposite direction. She saw him accurately enough to describe how he was dressed, accurately enough to describe his attractive companion Blanche. You know, there's some lines here, and I guess I might not get them perfectly. I should really start using a highlighter to do this. But every now and then, I mean like this. Did she try to run as the other girl who had from Theo in the library? Minnie's minx-like maneuvers wrecked her family emotionally and financially. I don't know, I might not get just the perfect sentences, but some of these do ring like it is a bit of fiction in a sense, and it strikes me a bit odd in a sense to cover some of these. I think that there's a way to lay out my feeling a bit more, but the words aren't coming to mind, so maybe this video is just a podcast is just about long enough. So with that, I'd love to hear what you think, and see you later. Bye.